Hi, this is Chris Dubois, pastor of the Awakening Church. I wanted to talk about the topic of grace and what is it that excites us so much about grace. You know, I grew up listening to that amazing hymn, Amazing Grace, and I still listen to it to this day, love it. In fact, it's probably my favorite worship song or hymn of all time. What is it that makes grace so amazing? You know, it excites me to talk about grace because grace has set me free. It has caused me to see when at one time I was so blind to the truth. Grace taught me how to fear God. It taught me how to love God. It set me free from the slavery of sin. I once was dead in sin, but now I'm alive to God. And it caused great victory in my life. Grace excites me, and I'm jealous to guard the truth of grace. And it's so important that we teach grace rightly. If there is a doctrine in the church today that is wrongly taught, it is grace. So often, the people go on two different extremes when dealing with grace. On one extreme, they look at grace from this legalistic standpoint where grace just merely saves you and that's it. Then you're on your own to work out, your own salvation in your own duty and effort and striving and willpower and beating yourself up, and all it's about is you trying harder and harder and harder, and it just becomes total dependence on self. But on the other extreme, though, is this cheap grace where we look at grace as this big cover-up, where we sin and we blow it and we just say, well, God's grace covers that, it's all good. And we're not sorrowful for our sin. We don't hate sin. We're not, repenting of sin. And, by God's grace, trying as we seek Him to obey all of Christ's commands into the new covenant. So it's what Dietrich Bonhoeffer called cheap grace. And we have to be so careful that we come to the balance, the middle where the truth is found with grace, that we need grace not only for salvation but sanctification, for our maturity and our growth and our journey in faith. But grace is not just a cover-up. Mercy, God's mercy is there for when we sin. He forgives us of our sins and cleanses us. But God's grace is there to empower us to walk in victory over sin, to not only save us from sin, but to save us continually and empower us continually. Salvation in the Greek is past tense, present tense, and future tense. So we're being saved continually. And this is where grace comes in, where we can be assured that at one point in time we were saved. And as we continue to grow in that sanctification, God's grace gives us the ability to obey God's will. God's grace gives us the ability to walk out of temptation and not give in to temptation, to find that way of escape. God's grace gives us the ability to obey all of Christ's commands under the new covenant. And God's grace is His enablement. It's His empowerment that gives us the ability to do God's will. I want to read from you in Titus 2:11. It says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people." And that's true, amen. Verse 12 says this, though, "training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age." So it's practical. It frees us and transforms us. Thank God for His grace.